that's the biggest problem with us being required to keep our cameras on all the time, is like, eating. It's like,
All right. There is the queue that we've started. Welcome everybody. Tonight's Halifax West Community Council, May 11th, public hearing plus some reports, and we'll get to those as we go. As usual, we'll do call to order and check councilors' cameras. So starting with Councilor Morse.
Good evening, everybody. Joining you from Clayton Park this evening. Nice to see you all.
Councilor Mason.
Vernon Street, irregulars reporting for duty, sir. District 7 here for the meeting.
Councilor Cleary.
Hello, colleagues. Mr. Chair, reporting live from Halifax West, Armdale. New backdrop in the house.
Nice. Lots of books. I hope you read them all.
Absolutely.
Councilor Sutter.
Good evening, everyone. Glad to be here. Thank you.
And Councilor Tuttle.
good evening, everyone, from District 11, Sprockfield, Sambro Loop, and Prospect Road communities. I'm happy to be here. Kind of, it's gorgeous out, but happy to be here with you guys.
Well, we can make
Councilor Cuddle did not mention that she has a pop-up rapid COVID testing site at Central Spryfield Elementary School off the Herring Cove Road, just spitting distance outside my district, past Williams Lake Road. If you have not had the swab up your nose, go get a test.
That's right. Thank you, Councillor Cleary.
Right, thank you. All right, moving to approval of minutes, April 27th. Get a mover and a seconder, please.
Happy to move that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
I'll
Moved by
second.
Councilor Cleary, seconded by Councilor Stoddard. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Seeing none, approval of the order of business, approval of additions and deletions. Are there any additions or deletions, Clerk?
Nothing from the clerk's office.
Okay, thank you. Anything from colleagues at all? Seeing none. Oh, sorry. Yep.
Oh, I don't, maybe, I'm just wondering, I have a question. I know that we have some people here wanting to make a presentation. I don't know if, do we talk about the order of business now, or?
Yeah.
I'm wondering if we could allow people to present now rather than wait till the end. We could move the presentations up.
Councilor Mason.
I'm really hesitant to do that. Our past practices, if they're speaking on something that's on the agenda for a public hearing later, then they can speak at the public hearing rather than now. I'm not sure which one it is, but in the past we've left it at the end for a reason, because there are opportunities for the entire public with full notice to have opportunity rather than just those that are here today.
Okay, it wasn't for the public hearing, it was for staff report.
So do you want to clarify? I don't want to clarify for you.
If I may, Mr. Chair, so typically at our community councils and our committee meetings, if there's something on the agenda, usually we don't move the public participation up for those particular items because public participation is just general. I'm easy either way. I mean, it is, I know I've heard from a number of people related to my motion on the Williams Lake lands for rezoning, 2 or 3 of them at least. It will be coming because it is beginning a process for public participation that will culminate in a public hearing. Everyone who's speaking will have their say. I'm easy either way if you want to move it up. I wouldn't suggest we move it up to now because the public hearing is supposed to start at 6 p.m. So we should stick to that as close as possible. So maybe after the public hearing, or leave it at the end of the agenda. Either way, as it relates to public participation, typically we don't do that as it relates to items that are on the agenda. But anyway, I leave it in your capable hands, Mr. Chair, in terms of how we do that.
Right. Thank you. So I, not knowing exactly what the members of the public, other than one that I'm aware of that want to speak on the Williams Lake tonight, I would feel more comfortable because we are just starting a process for that to stay at the end of the meeting, and they can obviously speak on the case. And then when we have public hearings and public participation and other aspects, they will have the opportunity to be part of the publicly announced and notified record. So I would be more comfortable to continue with our agenda tonight, but more than happy for them to participate at the end of the meeting, and they can speak on the issue that they want.
And with that, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so if that works for colleagues, I'll ask for approval of order of business, please.
So moved.
Moved by Councilor Cleary, second by Councilor Cuddle. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none. Business arising over the minutes, there are none. Calls for declaration conflict of interest. Seeing none. Motion of reconsideration, none. Motion of decision, none. Consideration to divert business, none. Notice of table matters, there are none. So moving on to the meat of the meeting, where we have a public hearing for case 22396, rezoning and development agreement for land off Elm Grove Avenue in Myra Road, Timberley. So as always, the order of events is the same as a regular public hearing. We'll start with staff presentation, and then give the applicant opportunity to present up to 10 minutes, and then we'll go to the public speakers list. We have one person who is registered to speak tonight, and in order to have signed up to speak, you'd have to have met the deadline of 4:30 p.m. the day prior to this hearing. So first, we will go to our staff presentation, which I believe Mr. McDougall is here on staff's behalf. Hello, hello.
Hello, thank you very much. Okay, great. Thank you, Haruka, for putting the presentation up. Unfortunately, Zoom doesn't like me very much, so I can't share my screen, but Haruka, the clerk, will move through the slides for me. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good evening. My name is Dean McDougall, and I'll be presenting for the public hearing for case 22396, which is a rezoning and development agreement application for lands off Elm Grove Avenue and Myra Road in Timberley. Next slide, please. The applicant for this proposal is ZAP Consulting on behalf of the property owner, and the lands are located off Elm Grove Avenue and Myra Road in Timberley. And the proposal is to create a multi-lot residential subdivision of 47 single-unit dwellings and 20 townhouse dwelling units. Next slide, please. So in terms of the site context, the left-hand image shows the site location in red, in the red circle, and the nearby landmarks. So it's adjacent to the Brunello Golf Course and residential development. It's in close proximity to the Rails to Trails pathway, the Ridgecliff Middle School, and Bayers Lake. And as we zoom in on the right-hand image, you can see the site is vacant today, and it's significantly treed. It's directly abutting the golf course. The Lakeside Fire Station, Willowbrae Academy Daycare to the north, and to the west, and existing low-density residential uses on Myra Road, Elm Grove Avenue, and St. Margaret's Bay Road. Next slide, please. So this is the subject site. It's vacant, so this is the view from Elm Grove Avenue, the dead-end street currently. And then the left-hand image is the subject site from Myra Road at the fire station. Next slide, please. When a planning application is made, it's often enabled by the planning policies, meaning it was envisioned that development would happen here, and rules and guidelines were written to help shape what that development would look like. So planning in HRM consists of 3 levels of documents. It starts with the regional plan, which is very high level, and it identifies where population growth should occur and where investment of services like transit, piped water, and sewer should also occur. The second level of planning policies is the community plan. This is focused in on a specific geographic area and gets more detailed on what type of development should happen where. Often planning applications such as this one, which require approval by council, are enabled in this plan. And for this application, the applicable community plan is the Timberley Lakeside Beachville Municipal Planning Strategy. And the third layer and most detailed planning document we have is the land use bylaw. So this outlines specific zoning and regulations that don't require any special approval by council. So if you meet the rules, you can go and get a permit without having to engage the public. Next slide, please. So the base zone for the subject site is R1, the single unit dwelling zone, and the site is designated urban residential. So the urban residential designation is designed to recognize the importance of the single unit dwelling environment, but also acknowledge the need for a housing mix. It also envisioned the development of large tracts of land through a comprehensive planning and site-specific development agreement process. So as such, enabling policies UR11 and UR12 were written to enable the requests for lands within the designation to rezone to the CDD, the Comprehensive Development District Zone, and enter into a development agreement for the comprehensive development of the site. Next slide, please. So the proposal consists of a new street extension off of Elm Grove Avenue through to Myra Road, and then we'll have 2 cul-de-sacs stemming off of that. And that will create frontage for lots in the 47 single unit dwellings. There's 2 frontages proposed for each, so frontages of 36 feet and frontages of 40 feet. And then 20 townhouse dwelling units, which would be located within 3 townhouse dwelling blocks. So the blue on the map illustrates where the townhouses will be located, and the orange is the 36 wide single unit dwelling lots, and the beige would be the 40 wide single unit dwelling lots. And the green is the stormwater ponds. Next slide, please. The enabling policies UR 11 and 12 direct council to consider the following in a decision for such an application. And that is that a mix of housing type is provided, that there are 2 separate accesses to the public road network, that traffic impacts on the existing road network are examined, that there are adequate and usable lands for community facilities. There's adequacy of municipal services such as sewer and water, and there's adequate controls on stormwater management. Next slide, please. The level of engagement completed for this application was consultation achieved through a mail-out notification and a public information meeting held on February 4th, 2020, back when we could meet in person. That was the last one I did, I think. And the feedback from the community generally included the following. So concerns regarding stormwater and flooding that are experienced today, traffic, and the lack of park space. So for notifications mailed out, there were 246. 22 people attended that meeting on February 4th. We've had 760 webpage views, and I've received 1 email on the proposal. Next slide, please. Several amendments were made responding to consultation, but also with negotiations with staff. And the first one was stormwater management. So the development is required to balance pre and post stormwater flows. So the post-development water flows must match or be better than the pre-development state. In addition to that, the applicant is proposing to remove an existing failing culvert at the dead end of Elm Grove Avenue and add additional flow capacity at this site to reduce potential flooding that may be experienced by residents today. Treed areas. So certain areas of the development will remain treed during the construction of the streets and services to maintain tree stands post-development at lot sales. And in terms of park space, a small pocket park was provided in the original proposal, but a park service assessment by our parkland planner identified the development as falling within acceptable service levels based on the proposed connections and existing parkland in the area. So as a result, cash in lieu of parkland is required for this application as opposed to land dedication. Next slide, please. So just a quick summary of the key aspects. I spoke to most of them already, but 67 residential units, 47 singles and 20 townhouse dwelling units is proposed. Non-construction zones for the tree retention during the construction phases, and the 2 new streets, or the new streets rather, the connector road between Elm Grove Avenue and Myra Road, and the 2 new cul-de-sacs. Next slide, please. In terms of non-substantive amendments, so just quickly to recap, a non-substantive amendment is a change to the agreement which would could be made without a formal public hearing. Instead, Community Council would just authorize this change by a resolution. So the proposed non-substantive amendments within this agreement are extensions to the commencement and completion dates of the development. Next slide, please. The request by the applicant is to rezone and then enter into a development agreement. So the process of such a request involves the joint public hearing on the rezoning portion and the development agreement portion. That's what we're doing tonight. So the decision tonight, though, would solely be on the rezoning aspect of the proposal. After the appeal period for the decision on the rezoning, it must pass before we come back to Community Council for a decision on the development agreement. As we're having the hearing tonight on the development agreement as well, if we do come back for the development agreement, it would just be a motion for resolution by Community Council. And the reason we have to do this is that to get to the development agreement, the lands need to be rezoned CDD. So it's a multi-step process. If approved, the applicant can apply for his final subdivision to begin construction of the streets and services. And then once that's constructed and approved, individual lots will be available for sale and construction. Next slide, please. So with that, staff recommend that Halifax and West Community Council adopt the amendment to the land use bylaw for the Timberlea Lakeside Beachville LUV as set out in attachment A of the staff report. And next slide, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions or clarifications from members of Community Council? Seeing none, I just have two. With the non-substantive, the only thing that's being asked for related to the extension is just for clarity. Usually we have the 120 days, and staff are recommending we do 240 days, and that was a staff recommendation to extend the signing of the agreement.
That's correct. Yeah, there's been delays due to the COVID state we're in, right. So just extended that a little bit. Mm-hmm.
So should we expect that with future agreements as well?
I believe so. Yeah, I think that is standard currently. That the extension, the 120 is extended. Yes.
Okay, great. And then the last piece is related to the reduced lot frontage area. In the report, it says staff support the reduced lot frontage, which will encourage rated housing types to provide more affordable low density housing options. I'll ask the same question to the applicant, so be prepared, applicant. So from staff, and where does that analysis come from?
That is an analysis that we've looked at. We had an MPS amendment recently in the Spryfield area that had the same request. And it basically comes down to what's the final market price on the sale price of the lot, and the less road to construct reduces the amount of overhead by the developer, which then trickles down to the person buying the lot. And we've looked at some articles and resources on this to confirm that argument made by the industry.
Right, but there's no assurance that even though those saved costs to the developer will be put on to the resident, it's just what you see from other places.
That's absolutely correct. No, there is no assurance at all that those prices could be lower.
Okay, great. Okay. Oh, Patty, did you have a question? Okay. Yep. Sorry, Councilor Cuttle.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. Your question about lot frontage was a good one. I was just wondering, particularly around, besides cost, what other benefits are there to potential benefits, because cost isn't even a potential benefit necessarily, to, what are the other reasons we would support smaller lot frontages? And in particular, I'm interested in how you ensure that they contribute toward a quality community, a good community experience. When we look at building communities, it's not just about density and saving on costs of construction. It's also about creating communities that have longevity and create a place that people want to live and can thrive and survive in. So I'm just wondering what else was considered in supporting the smaller lot frontages.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor. The smaller lot frontage for single unit dwellings is not something new to like in this certain application. It's something that's been done in the municipality for some time now through development agreements. They've been altering the requirements of the land use bylaw, which usually require much larger lots. So we have examples of the Clayton Park area in HRM, as well as the Governor's Brook area, just off the top of my head of a few. And they've developed communities that seem to be enjoyed by the residents there. So that would be my take on it. But to the other benefits of it, it relates to adding more efficient land use. So more people to contribute to the infrastructure that is required with the pipe services, paying for the street clearances, the snow removal, taxation. All of those things are all benefits that come with more efficient use of land by allowing for smaller lot frontages.
I think that, if we're going to do any qualitative, make any statements around kind of the qualitative aspects of communities, we need to ensure that we have something to base that on and not just an assumption. As I see the municipality move more and more towards denser communities, it raises the question of what else do we need to put in place to ensure those communities are good quality, and that it's not just about efficiency of infrastructure, particularly on a new development where the infrastructure is being paid for by the developer. So, again, it comes back down to, I think our long-term responsibility is really toward the residents and making sure that we're building, good communities first and foremost.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll just stick to questions of clarification. So in terms of, you already mentioned this and we know this, that a larger lot frontage is obviously more expensive than a smaller lot frontage. So in terms of the subdivision bylaw, as an example, what is the smallest lot size or the thinnest lot size, the narrowest lot size you can have under the subdivision bylaw?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, the subdivision bylaw will reference the requirements of the zone, but the minimum for frontage purposes, but the minimum width a lot could be, once the frontage is passed, it'd be 20 feet, I believe, 6.1 meters.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Stoddart.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking back on the public hearing that they had, and there was a couple of people that mentioned traffic concerns. The fact that it's going to be a cul-de-sac and it'll be limited parking in that area. Did they ever actually address this concern? Do you know?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, the cul-de-sac is still proposed, and the parking would be on street for a single unit dwelling, and if they have visitors, then it would be, off street for the single unit dwelling. So it's anticipated that there'd be driveways for each individual house, and then if you have visitors, they would be off street, or on street rather, so parking on the street.
On St. Margaret's Bay Road?
Oh, I'm sorry, no, on the new streets. So all of the parking would be off of the new streets, and all access to these new units would be off of the new streets.
Okay. And it did say that that fire services and ambulances would have no concern driving down the width of this new street?
Yeah, the streets would be built to current standards that take those vehicles into consideration.
Okay. And just to clarify, the developer is going to make sure that the sewer system and everything along that lines, the runoff and all of that is taken care of as part of the agreement?
That's right. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, because I noticed in the public hearing, there was a lot of concern about water and flooding. Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I believe that is it for clarification. Just waiting for any last second hand, seeing none. All right, we will go to the applicant. And I believe on behalf of the applicant, we have Mr. Connor Wallace. Welcome.
Yes, hello, good evening, Mr. Chair. Can everyone hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. And I believe your screen, yep, the presentation is up and the floor is yours. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate all of your time, and good evening, everyone. My name is Connor Wallace. I am a consulting planner with ZAP Consulting, here tonight presenting on behalf of the landowner Raymar Developments and Raymar Homes. I also would like to just note that I am joined by a colleague of mine, Andrew Forsyth from Design Point, who assisted in the kind of servicing aspect and analysis around this development proposal. So he's also here this evening to respond to any questions or clarifications members of council may have. So I have prepared a brief presentation this evening. I'd first like to thank Dean for his presentation as he kind of thoroughly summarized the development proposal and as it relates to the applicable planning policies in the area. I did put a few short slides together to kind of walk through the aspects of the development proposal itself that I wanted to just go through with you quickly, and then certainly am available following my presentation, both myself and Andrew, to respond to any questions or clarifications you may have. Next slide, please. So on your screen here is the proposed development for the parcel of land. This is a 67-unit subdivision development that's being proposed off of Elm Grove Avenue and Myra Road. This is a site that is currently vacant land, which represents kind of an infill opportunity for development that is surrounded by existing streets and infrastructure and community, as well as it is directly bordered by the links at Brunello Golf Course. A few aspects to the concept plan itself. The first is the land use that is being proposed. As Dee mentioned in his presentation, there are kind of three different types of land uses that are proposed. One is townhouse forms, which is noted kind of in the blue on our concept plan here. And then there's kind of two types of single unit dwellings that are proposed within the development. One being a single lot with 40-foot frontages, and one being a small single lot with 36-foot frontages as the minimum frontage requirement. A few other items to note on the concept plan. It does include connection to two existing public roads, Myra Road and the extension of Elm Grove Avenue. It includes two new streets that would be in the form of cul-de-sacs, providing access to additional development lots within the parcel of land. The parcel does include an existing brook, which I labeled and is located in kind of in the north west corner of the site. This brook is proposed to be preserved, including the buffer around it through this development proposal, through the imposition of creating a non-developable, non-disturbance area around it, as well as we are proposing to preserve an existing large wetland, which is shown kind of at the northern portion of the site between the two stormwater retention ponds that are also being proposed. They're noted in green, and these are part of the approach around the development to manage and mitigate stormwater runoff, which was a concern that was brought forward through the community through the application process. And I'll get into more details on that later in my presentation. Next slide, please. So as Dean mentioned, there was public engagement completed in accordance with HRM standards for applications of this nature, which included a public information meeting that was held in February 4th of 2020. I believe this was also my last in-person public information meeting just before the pandemic started. And it occurred just at the community center just down the street from the site. There were a few specific concerns that were brought up at that meeting that I wanted to highlight, and then also wanted to speak to our response to those concerns through our development proposal. As Dean mentioned, the concerns were relative to traffic impact, existing flooding issues for residents near who live near this proposed development site, concerns regarding servicing capacity, and concerns regarding construction impact on surrounding community. Next slide, please. So regarding traffic, we have completed a kind of thorough analysis around traffic for this particular development. We had a traffic impact study that was completed, which is a more detailed traffic analysis than a traffic impact statement. It looks at not only the trip generations that would come from the proposed development and their impact on immediate adjacent streets and intersections. It also looks at the forecast of development growth over planning horizon through to 2025. The study was originally done in 2019 and factors in the full build out of development and its impact on adjacent streets and intersections. It also analyzed the site distances, both at where Myra Road meets St. Margaret's Bay Road, as well as Parkdale Avenue, where that meets St. Margaret's Bay Road, which are kind of the primary access points from this site out onto the primary transportation corridor, which is St. Margaret's Bay Road. So this was a thorough study that was completed. It had indicated that a total of 52 two-way vehicle trips will be generated from the development during the AM peak hour and 69 two-way vehicle trips during the PM peak hour. And the study ultimately concluded that the development is not expected to have any sort of significant impacts on the level of performance of adjacent streets, intersections, or the regional street system, based on the traffic that's being demanded from the development and it having two separate site accesses. The study noted that the kind of diversion of traffic and filtration of traffic through this development and its various access points were deemed adequate. And this study was reviewed completed in accordance with HRM standards and reviewed by HRM engineering staff and was deemed acceptable in terms of its findings. And certainly can respond to any more specific questions relative to that following my presentation. Next slide, please. Regarding stormwater, this was probably the primary concern that was most frequently brought up at the public information meeting that was held back in February of 2020. And in response to the stormwater, the main thing we heard is there's been some issues with stormwater runoff that are causing flooding issues for residents living near this development site. And when we became aware of that information in more detail through public consultation, we did, and the team at Design Point did complete a more thorough analysis of the current conditions of stormwater in the area, and also prepared and worked with HRM staff to develop terms within the agreement to ensure that stormwater is properly managed through this development proposal. So what that includes is, it does include, as I mentioned before, the protection of the brook in the area, as well as the water course that surrounds it as a non-disturbance area. We are also protecting the large wetland that's located on the property and introducing 2 stormwater management ponds that will allow for the containment and retention of stormwater and filtration of stormwater, as particularly during large rainfall events, where there's typically lead to flooding issues that have been expressed by the community. The stormwater ponds are proposed to be designed in accordance with HRM and Halifax Water and Nova Scotia environment requirements in order to balance pre-development and post-development flows in accordance with their standards. As Dean mentioned, there is an existing culvert at the north end of Elm Grove that needs some repair and replacement, and on the south end of Elm Grove, near essentially where we're planning to extend Elm Grove Avenue, there is an existing storm pipe that's we're planning to install an overflow to the retention ponds in the wetland to mitigate the impacts of stormwater during rain events. And so where Elm Grove is being extended, a new properly sized system will be installed to handle 1 in 100-year storm flows, which this seems to be, through our analysis, an issue that's causing a lot of concerns for current flooding in the area that we're looking to resolve. And again, certainly able here to answer any specific questions with regards to stormwater following the presentation. Next slide, please. Regarding servicing and construction, we had prepared a servicing schematic based for our development agreement application in accordance with the application requirements, and the schematic was, and that essentially is a servicing study that indicates how the proposed development will be serviced, and it requires calculations to indicate that there is servicing capacity for development of this nature based on the existing services that surround it. So that was reviewed and accepted by HRM Engineering, and it was concluded that there is adequate service for this proposed development. This development will also lead to improvements within the municipal wastewater water system, by closing two dead-end loops of the water mains, one that's currently terminating at Elm Grove Avenue and another that's currently terminating at Myra Road. So this development will be able to kind of close those two loops together and create a connection within their system. And sewer flow through the new pipes is connected through Elm Grove Avenue and directly to St. Margaret's Bay Road, to the primary system there. The development agreement also includes non-disturbance areas that are to be protected during construction, including existing tree stands within those areas, as Dean mentioned in his presentation as well. And all construction activity will, of course, be in accordance with all of HRM standards with regard to construction for developments of this nature. Next slide, please. So I'd like to quickly just highlight some of the elements of the plan and some of the benefits that we feel this plan brings forward for the community in the area. As I mentioned, this is a fairly large tract of land that's currently surrounded by existing development, residential development, primarily, and the golf course is also directly abutting the development as well. So we saw this as an opportunity, through the policies that were enabled under the municipal planning strategy to apply, as opposed to proceeding with an R1 subdivision in accordance with the zone that's currently applied to the property, was to engage with the municipality to conduct a comprehensive planning process to bring in a mix of housing types within this development that allow for different housing types at more affordable levels due to their lot frontage, as kind of came up in the earlier discussion, as opposed to the R1 zone that requires 60-foot frontages and larger lots. It allows for the more efficient use of the roads and infrastructure that is going to be built there for a development of this nature, by providing additional dwelling units through those reduced lot frontages that will be able to access those services that would be introduced through the public infrastructure within the roadway. With regards to stormwater management, I had highlighted that in my slide specific to that, but we are proposing a significant stormwater management program within this development to help mitigate stormwater and ensure that those pre and post development flows are met, including upgrades to the current system at the end of Elm Grove Avenue that's causing existing flooding issues. We are protecting the water courses and wetland on the property. We are proposing sidewalks throughout all of the public streets in accordance with HRM standards to allow for pedestrian movement within the development itself and connections to the borders of the development. Part of that also includes a pedestrian pathway at the end of the cul-de-sac there that connects that roadway through a pedestrian connection to St. Margaret's Bay Road. And I think that was my last slide. So that's all I have for the presentation. And as I mentioned, myself and Andrew are here to answer any specific questions you may have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And that was right on track because our clerk put in the chat that your 10 minutes was up. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Opening up the chat here. Any questions or clarification from members of Community Council at all?
I do.
Yep, Councilor Cottle.
Sorry, I have my screens condensed and my chat keeps disappearing. Apologies. Yeah, I had a couple of questions. One was, I'm just looking at the map here, and at the intersection there of the two streets, there's that area that is shaded with the little dots. Is that representing a current wetland?
Mm-hmm. Yes, so to provide some clarification around that as well, there's a current wetland there that is in the process of an alteration application with Department of Environment through their standard process, which would apply to that wetland. So that wetland is proposed to be altered in accordance with Department of Environment's requirements, and that process is underway. So that is one element of wetland that would be altered as part of the development. As I mentioned before, there is the larger wetland to the north of the property that is remaining to be preserved to mitigate the impact on the natural environment, and also the wetlands are also quite beneficial for stormwater management as well. So that wetland will be utilized in that regard as well.
Okay, and another question of clarification, it would be, we mentioned the rails to trails, and I'm just wondering how this development relates to the rails to trails and how it potentially connects in, that it was nearby somewhere?
So to my knowledge, and I apologize as I'm not super familiar with the area, I do believe that the Rails to Trails trail is on the opposite side of St. Margaret's Bay Road as this current development is. So what was noted as part of this development was creating, we recognized that particularly the larger cul-de-sac within the development was creating a kind of dead-end scenario primarily for pedestrian activity in terms of providing access out to St. Margaret's Bay Road, which provides connections to the Rails to Trails being one of the amenities in the community, as well as it is about, I believe, 500 meters or so from a commercial node that's just up this St. Margaret's Bay Road here that has some of the everyday commercial services residents may require, such as a pharmacy, vet clinic, and some restaurants and things like that. So the idea was to, create that pedestrian connectivity as much as possible within this development, recognizing that there are some cul-de-sacs which in some cases can not be conducive to pedestrian movement. We wanted to ensure there was that direct connection as opposed to having to walk all the way around to access those services, the Rails to Trails being one of them.
Okay, and do I have time for one last question, Mr. Chair?
Yep, you do.
Yep, so I'm just wondering, on the townhouse blocks here, the one that is, I think, furthest north, I can't see the directional arrow because of my screen overlap. Yeah, the one to the farthest north there, next to the stormwater management. I'm just wondering, those two units on the end. I mean, they're very close. They're 3 units, like to one, the wetland in behind them, and the stormwater management system to the north of them. And I'm just wondering what measures are being put in place to ensure those homes are protected from flooding. If you could just talk a little bit more about the stormwater management and how that's intended to work.
Absolutely. I can provide a brief response here, and I'll provide Andrew the opportunity to respond to that as well. So from my understanding, there will be a more detailed subdivision application should council choose to approve this rezoning and development agreement regarding the more specific layouts of lots and these uses within the development and their relation to the stormwater management ponds. So through that process, we will be working under HRM standards as well as Halifax water standards and Department of Environment to ensure that there is adequate separation distance and protection between the stormwater management areas and any proposed residents that are being constructed. So we will be, referring to those as we go through the permitting and subdivision process, and to ensure that we meet all those applicable standards to make sure those are protected from any sort of stormwater management issues or risks associated with that. I'm not sure if there's anything else you wanted to add to that, Andrew.
Yeah, just one thing. I think the last couple of the 3 lots you talked about, plus even other ones in the subdivision, they'll end up being on slabs, so they'll be elevated above the elevation that needs to be so that the area doesn't flood. So in particular, those ones across the street, the 2 by the water course, those will be slabs elevated kind of up in the air a little bit to prevent any flooding. That's the only thing I can add to that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Static.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You talked about pedestrian traffic and the sidewalks. I just want clarification. Is there going to be traffic lights? Because the St. Margaret's Bay Road at this particular time, I know you did your traffic study, but it can be very busy and the cars don't always follow the posted speed limit. And I know there's going to be a certain amount of traffic now that will be coming out of the cul-de-sac. Has any thought been given into streetlights at that particular intersection?
Thank you for your question, and yes, happy to respond to that. To my knowledge, and unfortunately, I would love to have the traffic engineer who completed that study on the call tonight. However, there was a bit of limitations in terms of the amount of people we could have here, but from my knowledge and what was analyzed in this study was that the part of that analysis around the trip generations and the impact on the adjacent intersections, there was two particular intersections that were analyzed in detail. One was the intersection of Myra Road and St. Margaret's Bay Road, obviously be impacted by this development, as well as Parkdale Avenue and St. Margaret's Bay Road as well, which is kind of the northern access point to St. Margaret's Bay Road from this development. And that was part of that analysis, was analysis around requirements for any sort of left turn lanes or turn lanes into the development, and as well as based on the traffic generation, it was analyzed if it was triggering the requirement for signalized intersections as well. And my knowledge, the study had concluded that the volumes generated from this development would not trigger the requirement for those signalized intersections at either Parkmore Avenue or Myra, and that was kind of the results of the study. And as I mentioned, that was also reviewed by HRM and kind of deemed to be accurate in terms of its analysis.
Okay, so to confirm, you're not putting designated left or right turns or traffic lights or signaling lights?
Yes, that was the ultimate conclusion of the traffic study that was completed.
Okay, thank you.
I was on mute. Sorry, Councilor Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking for a little more detail on the wetland, please, and how the water management system overlaps or connects with the natural wetland, if you could, please.
Sure. Absolutely. Andrew, I may get you to respond to this one because I know you're a bit more knowledgeable in this subject, so I'll refer that one to you, please.
No problem. So what happens today is the water course that's shown on the plan actually gets picked up by a storm pipe that's in Elm Grove Avenue and basically goes to the north end of Elm Grove Avenue. Very little bit of that water gets to the wetland unless it's a heavy rainfall event. And then it gets to the point where it exceeds the capacity of that pipe in Elm Grove Avenue and overflows into the wetland. The biggest issue, I think, with the sort of the flooding in the area is mostly to do with that culvert downstream north of Elm Grove Avenue. So when that's repaired, that likely will relieve a lot of the flooding issues there. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Okay, so there is some overflow from the, pardon me, some overflow from the road that will be going into the wetland.
From the water course, like the water course will continue to flow into that pipe that's on Elm Grove, but when it exceeds the capacity of that at a certain point, it'll overflow into the wetland. As well as there's also additional land upstream that naturally gets in, like the golf course land will get into that wetland as well.
Okay, the reason I'm asking is just there's a wetland in my district that's in the center of a development, and it gets a lot of runoff from the road. And in the winter, the salt and that sort of thing is going into the wetland and basically killing it. So I think that could be an issue potentially, that wetlands need some kind of protection in order to function.
I understand. That makes sense. I mean, the way this is going to work actually is the water from the road is going to go into that 600 millimeter pipe on Elm Grove Road, and only in higher flows will it get into the wetland. So it might actually help that situation a little bit.
Okay. Thank you for explaining.
Thank you, Councillor. Not seeing anybody else on the list. I just wanted some quick clarification. I don't know this area very well. Looking at the diagram on what table is it? Schedule B, the black dots that are on the streets, are those where proposed sidewalks will be?
Sorry, just to clarify, are you looking at the concept plan that's on my presentation or the schedule within the agreement?
The schedule within the agreement. I don't have your.
Sorry, I just want to make sure I'm looking at the same plan as you.
Yeah. Schedule B, land use plan in the report.
Yes, so that's correct. The black dotted lines, those are sidewalks that will be incorporated as part of the public streets.
Gotcha. So Elm Grove Avenue, does that have sidewalks on both sides or one side?
I do not believe it currently does at this. I'm just going to try to double check right here quick, but I believe it currently doesn't have sidewalks.
Okay, I was just wondering if how that would continue, because I know you're doing the continuation of the walkway. Just wondering how that factored into Elm Grove, but that was you don't have to do too much digging on that. In terms of the street widths, what are the proposed street widths?
To my knowledge, they're based on HRM's local street standard, which I believe is a 16 meter right of way total. I may be slightly off in that regard, but they would be based on the standard for kind of local residential street and in accordance with HRM's design standards.
Okay, great. In the last one around the small lots, I mentioned I'd ask you this question. So in your presentation, you mentioned, and I can't quote you directly, but it mentioned that this would be more accessible or affordable than R1 lots. So when you say that, what do you mean? And does the owner have an idea of what affordable would be for those smaller lots?
In terms of the exact the price of the lots or you know the price of the homes that may be constructed on the lot, I don't have any specific numbers in that regard. However, to my knowledge, the current R1 zone has a minimum frontage of 60 feet, which is a fairly wide frontage, especially for sites like this that are in kind of urban residential designations. Although they are single unit dwellings, that's a wide frontage compared to a lot of the new single family homes that are being built across the municipality. And with those wider frontages, it creates larger lots and often larger houses, which are then become more expensive just due to their size. And it kind of originates from the lot frontage itself, gives the extra width and just creates larger homes. And so by creating smaller lot singles, it allows for smaller dwellings that are coming in at a more affordable price range to the market, as opposed to a 60-foot lot that would have a much larger home at a higher price. And another component of that is bringing in the townhouse uses as well, which would be even narrower road frontages and dwelling units as well that offer kind of another price point of availability for housing in the area.
Okay, that's great. So it's the only issue I have with that, and not particularly this application per se. It's just when we're thinking of today's market, we see the conversation of affordable, but not having that information, which obviously there's so much more steps to go. It's hard to say what those lots would be because you still have to go through some planning aspects. It's just hard to grasp how that aspect of the application is if we don't even have an idea. So I understand why you can't give it. It's just I think for us in the future, you know, we have to be very careful when we're using that word for affordable, especially with the market that we have today, where people are, as you know, looking to buy at any price point. Other than that, thank you. I don't have anything further. Appreciate the answers and colleagues for the questions and clarifications as well. So if it's okay, I will move on to the next step, which is the public aspect of this hearing. And we have one person who is signed up to speak. And that person's name is Adam Travis. And Adam, are you on the line? Yep, I do see Adam's name in the meeting. And if you're there, Adam, you can take yourself off. I see that you're off mute, but we can't hear you if you're speaking. I see we now have two Adam Travises in the meeting. One of them might work. Mr. Clark, I'm wondering if you could probably reach out to Adam and see, maybe it might be easier to call in.
Sure, I will.
Okay. So we'll just take a quick break, 6:57. We'll take a quick break and come back at 7 o'clock and allow clerk to to get Adam on the line, if that works for colleagues. I am hearing no one against it. So we'll take a quick break, come back for 7.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, Adam. This is Clark. Would you be able to hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, I can hear you as well. The meeting will reconvene in 1 minute,
Okay.
and your time will come to speak.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, welcome, Adam.
All right. Thank you.
So I'm just waiting to make sure all of our counselors are back so they all can be present for your presentation. So just waiting for Counselor Cuddle. Yep, see Counselor Cuddle is here. And just waiting for Counselor Morse. All right, great. Adam, you have 5 minutes. Floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. So a few friends and I had the opportunity to kind of take a look at this development. We've been getting a little bit more involved with developments as Halifax has been growing more and more. And we did a little overview of this, and some things we liked was that it was preserving that brook that exists and much of that wetland that is going to be remaining. We also did like that there is the inclusion of kind of that pedestrian walkway out, just making sure it's a little bit more walkable, accessible, and that ties in as well with the smaller lot frontages. You're not feeling like you're having to walk so far to visit a friend's or a neighbor's house, which is great. Also, that those smaller lot frontages reduce sprawl on the whole, which is nice to see. We're kind of building within our existing communities versus on the periphery, which is nice. We did have a couple questions, though, about it. The first is relating to that proposed walkway from that one of those cul-de-sacs out past the stormwater pond to St. Margaret's Bay Road near the intersection with Governor's Lake Drive. Right now, there's only sidewalks on, I believe, the east side of St. Margaret's Bay Road there. What's going to be done to make that a safe crossing for pedestrians?
So what we'll do is you can ask your questions, and then the applicant at the end has opportunity to respond. So when you're done presenting, they'll respond to your question. Okay.
All right. I understand. So that was the first one, is just facilitating a safe crossing for pedestrians at the end of that proposed walkway across St. Margaret's Bay Road. As the Councillor Stoddard mentioned, it's a fast stretch of road and not necessarily a safe place to walk right now. The other question that we had about this, and I'm surprised the word hasn't come up, but we've mentioned a lot about matching existing flows of water in and out of the site. just given that with climate change, we're going to be seeing an increase in rainfall in the maritime region here and in Halifax, as well as an increase in extreme weather events. What's being done with the stormwater retention and the wetland right now with this project to kind of facilitate those more extreme weather events in the future versus the current weather patterns that we have now? And let me have a look here. One last thing that we saw in the application was, in addition to the smaller lot frontages, some mention of kind of sustainable and energy efficient design principles into the houses when they're finally built. We just wondered if there was any kind of clarity or ideas shared from the developer or the applicant on what those features might actually end up being. Aside from that, those are the three questions that we had: just the crosswalk, what's being done to facilitate higher rainfalls, and what's being done to make these buildings a little bit more sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adam. We'll make sure that the applicant, when they have their chance to speak, will address those questions. Any questions from counselors for Adam tonight? No? Okay. Thank you so much, Adam. You're the only speaker tonight, so I'll pass it back to Connor to address any of the questions you had.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to make sure everyone can hear me again. Okay, great. Thanks, Adam, for your presentation and for your questions and clarifications. So in response to your questions, we have allocated as you mentioned, the proposed walkway from the cul-de-sac out to St. Margaret's Bay Road. The agreement speaks to the terms of providing that walkway within the lands in which the agreement's registered to. So the agreement doesn't speak to any sort of requirements or mandates to create a crossing over St. Margaret's Bay Road. And perhaps staff can speak to this a bit more, but our focus was to create that connection out to St. Margaret's Bay Road, recognizing that is a primary transportation corridor, but it also provides connections to various amenities within the community. However, the agreement doesn't speak to providing a crossing across that road. I'm not sure from staff standpoint or HRM standpoint if there's any sort of planned visions or upgrades for St. Margaret's Bay Road in general, which may include some upgrades to pedestrian services in this particular segment. But the goal with this development was to recognize that there was a connection needed out to that road, and that if there are any future upgrades associated with that road, this connection will be there to kind of link up with those improvements and help improve the overall connectivity of the area. So that'd be my response on the proposed walkway. With regards to the climate change aspect and analysis around stormwater, I may refer that to Andrew as well, just to speak to the stormwater management analysis and how that may have been factored in.
Yeah, sure. So on that, we have to, when we get into the detailed design for the storm infrastructure, we need to follow Halifax Water's guidelines, and in that is prescribed rainfall events that we need to use in our modeling, and they include climate change in their rainfall events that we need to use. So I think that somewhat covers that question, I believe.
And then lastly, you had mentioned regarding the sustainable and energy efficient design principles associated with the homes and dwellings that are being constructed on the property. In terms of like the very specifics of that, we haven't gotten to that stage in terms of the exact design standards of these homes. That being said, the new homes that are being constructed, that would be constructed here and a lot of other areas of the municipality, are being constructed with much more efficient building systems in terms of wall assemblies, very detailed kind of aspects of the building design to ensure the minimized leakage of air from dwellings, therefore requiring less heat overall to heat these types of dwellings, more efficient heating systems, things such as heat pumps and things like that are very standard for all new construction of residential homes. So by bringing in new dwelling units into this area, they will be built with much more energy efficient construction assemblies and heating and cooling systems that will help benefit the longevity and the energy efficiency of the dwellings within this development.
Thank you so much, Connor. So, not seeing anyone jumping up to get any more questions or case. Again, I asked for the public hearing to be. Oh, council, did you have a?
I just wanted clarification from staff. Is that still allowed at this point?
So we'll close the public hearing, and then once we put the motion on the floor, you can ask away.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So ask for public hearing to be closed. A motion.
Motion to
Moved.
close.
Moved by
Second.
Councilor Sutter, second by Councilor Mason. All those in favor, say
Aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. All right, public hearing is closed. Councilor Sutter, I'll ask you to put the motion on the floor, then you can carry away.
Okay. I move that Halifax and West Community Council adopt the amendment to the land use bylaw for Timberley Lakeside Beachville as set out in the attachment A of the staff report dated February 17th, 2021. I so move.
Second.
Moved by Councilor Sutter, second by Councilor Mason. Councilor Sutter, the floor is yours.
I like this idea. I just have a couple of concerns in connection with traffic. It's already been stated that St. Margaret's Bay Road is becoming a very popular road as far as traffic goes. A lot of people are avoiding the Timberley Parkway because of the backup of the traffic there. So I'm a little concerned that there's no means for crossing the St. Margaret's Bay Road. And they already suggested that, or already stated there's sidewalks on one side, but there's no sidewalk on the other. And I was thinking maybe a pad or something with a crosswalk or something so that an accident is not created in that area. And I'm just wondering if staff could maybe respond to that and just give me some clarification if it's possible to have that added or at some point. I'm not sure what the process is, but.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the councillor. So as Connor alluded to, the legal aspect of it all is that the agreement can only regulate the lands within the agreement. So we can't require them to make improvements off-site legally. So for that crosswalk, which would be off-site on HRM property, that would be evaluated at the detailed design by our engineer staff and strategic transportation to see if it's warranted to have a crosswalk put in place there. And if it's determined that it should be, it would be flagged and would be incorporated in future upgrades and designs that and improvements that are required that they do and plan and that you approve through budgeting and such. So that would be the process for it being put in place here.
So how long do they usually wait? Do they wait until, how long would they wait after the houses are complete? Is there a certain time frame that they would say like a year later we'll study it or?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the councillor, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to the timeframes, but in past experiences, sometimes it is complaint based, sometimes it's evaluated, it's determined at the detailed design, like when they go to the final subdivision and they're doing the detailed design of the streets, and it'll be flagged then.
Because there's quite a few families that will be on that street that will be actually coming out onto the St. Margaret's Bay Road, and like again, I can't emphasize enough how much traffic there now is on the St. Margaret's Bay Road. I know they did the traffic study, but I think once this subdivision is up and going, there's going to be a lot more traffic than they mentioned in this report. Well, not in your report, but their presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And for clarification on the Councillor's question, Dean, so is the analysis that will be done during the detailed design, is that something that can be captured and you can take it back to staff, or with a motion or some kind of, or how do we make sure that that request will be looked at?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I will have to look into that. I don't know the answers to that off the top of my head, so I will have to look into that answer for you. And I see my manager, Carl Purvis, is popped up on the screen, so perhaps he could possibly answer.
Yeah, Carl?
Good evening, Councillor. Yeah, to you, Mr. Chair. So it's completely up to you if you want to make a separate motion in addition to the one in terms of your decision on this. That will take it to the top of the pile. To what Dean said, he's absolutely right. The engineers at the time where they're looking at a development permit, if council were to adopt this, the engineers would look at that and they would acknowledge that, oh, this is a path and it doesn't actually lead to anywhere. But they'd also be looking at what point, I'm just looking on the map now, at what point on the curve, you know, where the Willowbrae Ombre or the Willowbrae Academy is on there on the curve, how far down that crosswalk would be from that curve, and is there enough distance between the curve and the sidewalk to be safe in terms of, is that an appropriate spot for a crosswalk to be given the speed that they are? So they would do that assessment. So there would be need, but also location. I'm looking elsewhere. It looks like the next nearest sidewalk is up near the pharmacy further up to the north and around the curve. That would be a fair distance away to walk where there's no sidewalk. So they'd be looking at decisions to say, well, are we going to have a sidewalk connecting to that crosswalk? Is a crosswalk appropriate here? Is it safe to be here? Is it warranted here? Do we feel that there'd be enough use to warrant that? Those types of looks. But if you were to make a motion, that would put it at the top of the pile and get it on their radar.
So, Councillor, I'll leave it up to you if you want it to be captured in the minutes, or if you want to make a motion for staff to, while they do, if this gets passed, to investigate that.
I'd like to put a motion on the floor because that area concerns me a lot. And I think it's important that we look at that. So if the clerk would help me out.
If I was to give you my advice, you don't have to take it.
Okay.
that staff would analyze the potential of adding pedestrian crossing on, was it Governor's Lake and St. Margaret's Bay Road? Is that the intersection you were talking? I'm looking at the map here, so I don't want to say it incorrectly. Where the path ends? Is it that goes on?
Yeah, where it goes on to the St. Margaret's Bay Road.
Okay, so Governor's Lake, so that staff analyzed potential pedestrian crossing at the intersection of Governor's Lake Drive and St. Margaret's Bay Road at the end of the proposed walkway. Does that solve? How does that sound for you, Councilor?
Doesn't sound too bad as long as I can put it together the way you did.
Oh, well, you don't. I think clerk might have captured that. Ms. Clerk, were you able to capture that?
Mr. Chair, it's Alicia. I can just read that back really quick just
Okay,
to
great.
confirm no problem. That Halifax and West Community Council requests that staff analyze the potential of adding a pedestrian crossing at the intersection of Governor's Lake Drive and St. Margaret's Bay Road at the end of the proposed walkway.
Okay, that sounds really good. All right.
If you're happy with that and you want that to be added as,
I would second that, Mr. Chair.
all right, thank you. So second by Councilor Cleary. And for process wise, this would just be added to the main motion as an amendment.
Because it's not in a development agreement, would it be appropriate to, as Mr. McDougall mentioned, deal with the DA, then maybe have this motion come up for vote separately after?
If I'm not sure. I'm looking at any advice from our intuitive staff. Oh, and we have
Hi,
a solicitor.
Megan for the solicitor here. Where the motion for the land use amendment is already on the floor, I would propose, as Councillor Clear just suggested, dealing with that motion first, and then coming back and adding this motion next.
Okay.
Putting this motion on the floor.
Great. So what we'll do is, thank you, Meg. So what we'll do is we'll vote on the motions on the floor, and then we'll come back for you, Councilor Sutter, to put the motion that you just read back. And it's in a second by Councilor Cleary, so we know that it will get moved. And if there's any discussion, we can have discussions. But I think you covered most of your concerns. So are you happy with dealing with the motion that's on the floor first, and then once we deal with that, we can put your motion on the floor to be added afterwards?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you. I will just asking, will the clerk put it in the chat, or
if you can do that, please, that'd be great.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
All right. So I'm sorry, Councilor. So seeing that there's been the question, so you have a question on the main motion, or are you calling for the question, Councilor Cutter?
I'm calling for the question on the main motion.
I have a question.
Oh,
on the
okay.
main motion.
Sorry.
That's
All
okay.
right, Councilor Cutter.
Thank you. This would be a question for staff, and it's just really around process. So, I mean, currently we're looking at just rezoning, right? We're not looking at the development agreement or approving the plan that we see in front of us. It's just looking at, rezoning. And I'm wondering about kind of order of operations. Well, we know that this is being looked at by the Department of Environment in terms of doing some work with removing one of the wetlands on the site. Does approving the rezoning have any impact on how the Department of Environment might consider this site? I mean, is there, can we even, if we approve the rezoning, can we even move to toward the DA until that Department of Environment piece is sorted out?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. The environmental piece with the Nova Scotia Environment Wetlands, that's required for any subdivision application. So if this were happening as of right under the R1 zone, they're putting a new street in with the 60-foot lot, that would be a requirement at that point in time too. So it's part and parcel of the process, regardless of the rezoning or development agreement. So it doesn't, it's not hinged upon an approval. If they're going to alter the land, they need to get that approval in place from Nova Scotia Environment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Just looking, no one in the chat. So I'd ask for someone to call for the question on the main motion.
Question.
Question has been called. All those in favor on the main motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Seeing none. So that passes. And Councillor Sutter, I'll go back to you. And I'm not seeing the motion. There we go. Motion's in the chat. Councillor Sutter, it's all yours.
Thank you.
Oh, and we'll probably have to add, since we're not on that item for case, maybe at the beginning, rezone. What's the easiest way, clerk? Should we put the case or the land at the beginning so we know what the motion's for? Because right now it doesn't reference. Councilor Cleary?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just a quick point of order. So on the motion, and perhaps our solicitor can help with this, and I don't think we need to reference the case because, again, it has nothing to do with the LUB or the DA. That'll be part of this. Can a community council request that staff analyze this, or does it have to be us as a community council recommending to regional council that staff look at this? Or because for example, when we're at the Transportation Standing Committee, which is probably the most appropriate place for a motion like this, it would then go to staff, come back as a report. If we were going to do anything, TSC would have to recommend it to council. So community council would recommend a staff report. If that staff report comes back with something, would that then not have to go to regional council? I guess similar to Councillor Cuddle's question, I'm looking at order of operations process here. What is the mandate of community council when it comes to things in the right of way?
Right. So my understanding, and this was before we spoke on or before we passed the other motion, that it was part of the detailed analyze phase of the proposal. So now that we're not dealing with it at the time of the proposal, I think the question of what you're asking now is how do we look at it outside of that? Because before it was when staff were doing the analyzing it. Now that we're out of that phase, either we have to reference it that we want them to look at this while they analyze this case, or look at it as a separate thing, which then means it goes to another committee, as you mentioned, Councilor Clary. So I guess, yeah, I'm not sure how we want to deal with it now that we passed the other case. And then you might have some insight.
Yes, sorry, Mr. Chair. I'm just reviewing the motion again now that it's in the chat. And I would recommend that it would say that Halifax and West Community Council recommend that Regional Council request a staff report to analyze the potential of adding a pedestrian crossing at the intersection of Governor's Lake and St. Margaret's Bay Road. I would say period, because this is, as you just said, this is now outside of kind of the scope of.
You're breaking up. Yeah. I can't really hear you.
Yeah, you broke up. I'm gonna mute, because sometimes when multiple people are unmuted, it cuts you out. So if everyone can mute, that might help.
Can you hear me now? Yeah, so I would recommend that the motion be changed to that the Halifax and West Community Council recommend that Regional Council request a staff report to analyze the potential of adding a pedestrian crossing at the intersection of Governor's Lake and St. Margaret's Bay Road.
That's cool with the seconder if Ms. Stoddard, as the mover, is cool with that. Oh, you're muted, Iona.
Thank you. I'm fine with that. So,
all right. The mover and the seconder are fine with that. If there's nothing further, I asked for the question to be called unless anyone else has something further on that item. Oh, question to be called on that motion, please.
Question.
Great. Questions called. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Seeing none. All right. Thank you for that, councilors. So moving on to our next item, which is our reports, 3.1.1, case 22898, 13th Amendment for Brunello Estates Development Agreement, Timberley. And I believe staff are here tonight for a brief presentation on this item.
Yes, hello, Mr. Chair. Thank you again.
The Dean Show. All right.
My name is Dean McDougall, and I'm the planner assigned to this case, file 22898, which is the proposed 13th Amendment to the Brunello Estates Development Agreement. So as requested at the last meeting, or the meeting before that properly, I'm here to provide a brief overview of the existing agreement and this 13th Amendment. So next slide, please. So the Brunello development is located off Highway 103 in Timberley. So it's very similar to the application that was just on your agenda. It's shown in the red circle on the map, and it's approximately 600 acres in size or so. And you can see where it is situated in regards to the local area. So the Highway 103 to south, St. Margaret's Bay Road, Bayers Lake, the Clayton Park West and Halifax mainland in relation to the site. Next slide, please. There's a history to the site that goes back to the 90s. In 1992, lands were zoned from the R1 to the CDD to enable the planned infill development of the parcel. And in 94, a development agreement was approved for a purely residential community, so more of a suburban design. Nothing actually materialized from that approval. And in the mid to late 90s, a new landowner took over and proposed changes to the development concept. So which resulted in 2001, where the former Western Region Community Council approved amendments to the Timberley Lakeside Beachville Municipal Planning Strategy that allowed the development of a new mixed-use community Also approved at that meeting was a development agreement that permitted the subdivision and development of the lands according to that approved land use concept. Next slide, please. So that new land use concept back in 2001 is what we have today. So it's a mixed use development of approximately 3,200 dwelling units. So the planning theory behind this style of development at the time was the principle of creating employment and community nodes in appropriate decentralized locations. So instead of having a bedroom community, if you will, that's all low density residential units, so your typical image of suburbia on the outskirts of a city, you instead have something like this, which would be more of a small town design with a mix of uses. So in this circumstance, we have a community with mixed residential forms, an 18-hole golf course, park and recreation areas, a town center, and commercial nodes along the two highways, so Highway 103 and St. Margaret's Bay Road, or Highway 3. The development of this community has been incremental since its approval, but it's working towards the end vision, which will be the full built-out community you see here. Next slide, please. So a bit more on the specifics of the full build-out. So the agreement has identified the locations of primarily everything. So the approved locations for the multi-unit dwellings are shown in yellow.
Sorry, Dean. Sorry.
Are shown in the yellow cross. The town center is in the blue X, and then the commercial nodes are along the highways are the red triangles. Next slide, please. So green space and pedestrian connectivity is a significant aspect of the planned community. So program park space is shown with every green star. Also, every street other than the Timberley Village Parkway will have a sidewalk, and there will be trail and pedestrian connections at any location where desired lines are anticipated. So it would be possible to bike from one park on one end across the development to the other, another park on the other end. Next slide, please. So the original DA, it laid the groundwork for the road network, the servicing of the site, stormwater management, subdivision and phasing, parks and recreation locations, the permitted land uses, where they can be located, and built form regulations. So things like height, setbacks, parking, they're all written into the DA currently. Next slide, please. Most of the development is permitted to happen as of right, meaning they can work with our land development and subdivision team on constructing the community. However, there are some aspects of the development that require a non-substantive amendment. So those things include the development of the town center, development of multi-unit buildings, the development of alternative housing, so things like work-live units or small homes, and the development of the commercial areas, of the commercial nodes I spoke to earlier. Next slide, please. Over the past 20 years, the development, as I mentioned, has progressively been building out. It started with the golf course, which is the dark green areas. Then the areas shown in yellow are the residential areas that have been completed or are in progress. And then circled in blue is the subject site of this amendment. So to date, approximately 520 dwelling units have been approved and or built. And of those 520, approximately 130 units are within a multi-unit dwelling, which doesn't include this proposal. So most of the construction has happened as of right, as I mentioned, and they've been moving through the permit process, but some has happened through the non-substantive amendment. So the multi-unit dwelling was approved a couple of years ago, and then also the commercial nodes on each highway. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that the development of multi-unit dwellings is required to go through the non-substantive amendment process. So any non-substantive amendment is evaluated against the development agreement, but also MPS policy. So the development agreement outlines the development standards for multi-unit building, and the MPS policy outlines a broader objective, so density, stormwater management, road network, green space, things like that for the entire planned community. And staff advised that this application meets both. Next slide, please. So the height, setbacks, density, amenity space, parking requirements, they're all established in the DA. But because the development of a multi-unit dwelling is through the non-substantive process, the applicant can vary these requirements at the discretion of community council. So the applicant has specifically requested that the side yard setback be varied from the regulations in the DA. So the development agreement requires the side yard to be a quarter of the height of the building. So that would mean Tower A side yard setback requirement would be 13 meters and Tower B would be 10 meters. Tower A, if you look on the site plan on the left-hand image, it's proposed to be 4 meters from the golf course property line, and Tower B is proposed to be 9 meters. And Tower A's podium, which is a story taller than the height of a single unit dwelling, is proposed to be 6 meters from the single unit property line. But above the podium, the setback increases to 12 meters, approximately 12 meters, which is just a slight deviation of the required 13 meters. So staff believe with the proposed setbacks and stepbacks and the are adequate given the design of the building they increase as the building increases in height, and the adjacent land use is the golf course, that these are okay, and we recommend approval. Next slide, please. So engagement for this application was signage at the property and a website on HRM's applications webpage. As this is a non-substantive amendment, a public meeting and hearing are not required. The webpage views were 140, and then I've received one email on the proposal. Next slide, please. So staff recommend that Halifax and West Community Council approve by resolution the amending development agreement as set out in attachment A of staff report. Next slide, and thank you.
Thank you, Dean. Councillor Mason.
I'm not going to put the motion on the floor. I'm just going to apologize to Mr. McDougall, who gave an excellent presentation, and that had nothing to end to my colleagues. I got the AstraZeneca shot at 11:40, and I'm really already feeling it, and I'm barely holding on. So I should have muted my mic. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Councillor Mason, for clarification. Anyone else have any questions? No, seeing none. So really quickly, just for broader clarification, this is just a continuation of the agreements that's been worked on over the years, and just is whatever phase it is, the next phase of those agreements.
Yeah, yes, Mr. Chair, that's correct. This is a piece in the puzzle, if you will.
So the only question I have related to this now is, if you were to rewind the hands of time and look at this development in today's context, which is kind of, it's counterintuitive to rewind it and look at today, but just in general sense, if you were to look at how we analyze proposals and how we think about development in communities and et cetera, would what we're looking at today meet how staff would analyze a current proposal, or is really this following the 2002 or 2003 approvals moving on to now?
Well, Mr. Chair, the approval back in 2001 created specific policy within the planning strategy to evaluate an agreement again. So in my analysis, yes, this would be a similar design to what would be approved by evaluating it to policy, because it was written specifically for the
Right.
a layout of this size. So yeah, generally speaking, this would be the same design.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's it for me. So I don't see no one else putting their name in the chat. So I ask for this motion to be put on the floor by Councillor, I believe, Councillor Stoddard. Is that you? All right, great. The floor is yours again. And you're on mute.
Right, okay. I move that Halifax and West Community Council, 1, approve by resolution the proposed 13th amending development agreement, which shall be substantially of the same form as the set out in attachment A of the staff report dated February 17th, 2021, and 2, require the 13th amending development agreement to be signed by the property owners within 240 days or any extension thereof granted by council on request of the property owner from the date of the final approval by council and any other bodies as necessary, including applicable appeal periods, whichever is later. Otherwise, this approval will be void and obligations arising hereunder shall be at an end. I so move.
Second, enthusiastically, Councillor Mason.
Moved by Councillor Stoddard, seconded by Councillor Mason. Do you have any further comments at all, Councillor Stoddard?
No, as stated by staff, this is originally 2001, and there's just been amendments to the original development, and I don't have a problem with this. I've gone over it a few times, and everything seems to be in order. Thank you.
Great. Anyone else have any further comments or questions? Seeing none, you know what, I'm not even going to comment. I'll just ask for the question.
Question. Can I ask for the question?
Yeah. Question's been called. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those any say nay. Councillor Mason, you got me out the groove because oh gosh, it's all your fault. So that motion passes. Thank you, colleagues. We're moving on to our next item, which is 13.1.2, council request for rezoning of PID 002715850032 3139 0032 3147 on and near Williams Lake, Halifax. And I don't think there's a staff presentation on this. We'll just go right to councillor for the motion, which that's Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. This is clerk. There is staff presentation for this.
You are right. Yes, we did talk about that. Thank you very much. I forgot. So we have staff here who have the brief presentation for us.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay, I will just see if I can share my screen. Are you able to see that?
Not yet.
Oh, right. I am getting a notice that host disabled attendee screen sharing, so I may not be able to share.
I'm going to promote you, so you should be able to share.
Okay.
Ruka has all the power.
A second. Would you be able to try it again?
Okay. Okay, can you see that?
Yep, we are good.
Great. Oh, okay. So good evening, Chair and members of Community Council. My name is Leah Perrin. I'm a principal planner with the Regional Policy Program. And tonight I will be giving this brief presentation regarding lands near Williams Lake in Halifax. Is that advancing to the second slide?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Okay, in late 2019, 3 privately owned parcels of land located on the south side of Williams Lake were listed for sale. So you can see the extent of the subject lands in red in the image on this slide. Due to their location on Williams Lake and next to the Shaw Wilderness Park, concerns were raised in the community about the potential that these lands could be developed without considering their environmental value. To respond to these concerns, on June 17th, 2020, Halifax and West Community Council requested a staff report that would consider rezoning the subject lands to urban reserve. So this is that report. So the subject lands are split, designated, and zoned. The regional plan designates the western portion of the lands as urban settlement, and the eastern portion is designated urban reserve. I'll first speak to the lands to the west, as shown in this image as RDD, and then I'll speak to the eastern portion shown in this image as urban reserve. So the lands to the west are designated urban settlement and envisioned for service development within the life of the regional plan, which is before 2031. At the community plan level, the Halifax Secondary Municipal Planning Strategy and Mainland South Secondary Planning Strategy have designated this area as residential development district. This designation has been applied to a large portion of the Spryfield area where there is existing municipal water and sewer or the potential to extend water and sewer. The designation envisioned a mix of dwelling types and supportive commercial and recreational uses. That policy sets out two different options for developing the RDD lands, one as of right and one by development agreement. The RDD zone allows R1 and R2 uses as of right, single and 2-unit dwellings and a range of institutional and recreational uses. As of right means that any proposed development that meets the requirements of the land use bylaw and the regional subdivision bylaw can go ahead through the regular development permit and subdivision process. There doesn't have to be additional council approval or public engagement. The RDD designation also allows council to consider other uses, for example, apartment buildings by development agreement. The development agreement process does require public consultation and council approval. So the process that development takes would be dependent on what type of development is ultimately proposed. Coming back to the lands to the east, shown shaded and labeled as urban reserve on the image. The urban reserve designation was applied to lands envisioned for service development beyond the life of the regional plan, so after 2031. The regional plan sets up the urban reserve zone, which gets implemented through the Halifax mainland land use bylaw. The intent of the zone is to prevent premature development that would make future service development more difficult. It's like a holding zone. The urban reserve zone only permits single unit dwellings on existing lots with on-site sewage and wells. So this prevents residential subdivision until the urban reserve area is comprehensively planned as a whole. The Mainland South Secondary Planning Strategy includes a series of environmental sensitivity maps that show features including tree cover, exposed bedrock, wetlands and streams, and steep slopes. The policy identifies that urban development could negatively affect the natural environment in these areas and directs that the maps be considered when evaluating zoning changes or development agreements. So if a proposal were to come in for an apartment building, for example, which could be considered through a development agreement process, these environmental features would need to be considered by council. However, if an as-of-right subdivision proposal for R1 or R2 uses was received, there is more limited review of environmental features. So the land use bylaw does include riparian buffer requirements, which requires maintaining vegetation and setting back development at least 20 meters from a watercourse. But the land use bylaw does not have specific requirements for tree retention or direction on how to handle bedrock or areas with steep slopes. Therefore, staff are recommending that council direct us to consider whether changes to the RDD zone on the subject lands are appropriate to better protect the environmentally sensitive features that are already identified in that policy. The Halifax Green Network Plan identified that since a significant portion of the urban reserve in this area is now the Shaw Wilderness Park, there's a need to consider whether this continues to be the right designation. So consistent with this direction, staff are intending to consider this to be ongoing regional plan review. So the recommendation in this report is includes two parts. So first, for the subject lands, staff are recommending council direct us to consider site-specific amendments for the portion of the subject lands that are designated and zoned RDD, with the intent of better protecting the site's environmentally sensitive features. If council chooses to initiate this planning process, it will require public consultation, including consultation with the property owner. It's important to note that this is not any kind of moratorium on development. That development could be proposed and proceed under current policy and regulations at any time. And then for the broader Purcell's Cove Urban Reserve area, staff are recommending this be considered as part of the regional plan review. This will include considering redesignation and rezoning of Shaw Wilderness Park to reflect its use as a park, consulting with property owners, the public, and other interested stakeholders to better understand the vision for the Purcell's Cove Backland area, and consider an appropriate redesignation and rezoning for the remaining lands within the urban reserve designation and zone. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to take any questions. Oh my God.
Thank you. So, Council,
just struggling with my video here a little. There we go.
No,
I thought I closed the window entirely.
No worries. Council, do you want to put the motion on the floor, or do you want to do some? Actually, yeah, put the motion on the floor, and then you can ask your questions, please. And thank you,
Mr. Chair. So, I move that Halifax and West Community Council recommend the Regional Council direct the Chief Administrative Officer to 1, initiate a process to consider site-specific amendments to the Halifax Secondary Municipal Planning Strategy and Halifax Mainland Land Use Bylaw for PID 00323139 and portions of PIDs 002715585 and 00323147 Zoned Residential Development District, RDD, in order to better protect the environmentally sensitive features identified on maps 3A and 3B of the Mainland South Secondary Planning Strategy, and follow the public participation program for municipal planning strategy amendments as approved by Regional Council on February 27th, 1997, and 2, consider the amendments to the Regional Municipal Planning Strategy, the Halifax Secondary Municipal Planning Strategy, and Halifax Mainland Land Use Bylaw for lands currently designated in zoned urban reserve and the Purcell's Cove Backlands area as shown on map 1 of this report through the ongoing regional plan review, case 22257, in order to protect the environmentally significant features in the area consistent with the policy directions outlined in this report.
Second, Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. So a couple of comments and questions. So, when I moved this motion a year ago, I didn't know where staff was going to come down on their recommendation. And I have to say the report and the recommendation, in my opinion, are spot on and exactly what I was hoping for. And I think exactly what our committee was hoping for. In terms of the process, so, and my questions for Ms. Perrin are, going through now, obviously, any time we rezone lands, there has to be community engagement. If we were to simply just start the process today and say, let's rezone them all to urban reserve, let's get it done and do it, how long would that take? And a corollary to that is looking at this and the way these motions are crafted, what you're talking about, especially in the context of things like the Green Network Plan that we have in place, especially looking at Halifax and the overall view of development in this area and especially further down this peninsula. What are the other types of designations, the other zones that we could consider for lands of environmental significance, especially when you look at, if you were to overlay the planning map with the Green Network Plan, what are we talking about here and what kind of protection or zoning would provide protection for these lands? So in terms of process, how long are we looking at if we were to just simply, let's just urban reserve it right now, and going this more methodical, thoughtful approach, what are the kinds of options we have in front of us for zoning?
Thank you through the chair to the councillor. So I guess I would start off by saying, in terms of process and how long things will take, certainly our team has a lot on our plates at the moment, so we're having to prioritize our resources and the way that we're working on things. So certainly I'm hopeful that the way that we have broken down the recommendation into 2 parts, so the portion sort of the broader consideration of the urban reserve through the regional plan review is something that we were going to be considering anyway, independently of this report, because we had that direction for the regional from the Halifax Green Network Plan. So that is sort of one of the things in the bucket for the regional plan review. In terms of these site-specific amendments, I think the expectation is that our urban plan amendments team would be taking that on as kind of any application. Typically, plan amendment applications are about a 2-year process, so it's certainly not a quick change, but it is, as we sort of work through the planning process and do public consultation, and we'll be reaching out to the property owner. There may be things that could happen, in a different way. We'll just have to see kind of how it goes. In terms of the sort of types of zones and things that we can do in order to protect land, certainly the way that the regional plan has kind of limited subdivision, sort of large scale subdivision in our more rural areas is a way of kind of limiting the fragmentation of the landscape overall. And then the charter is much more specific about the things that we can do to prohibit development. So we can prohibit development where there are steep slopes. We can prohibit development where there is marshy, low-lying lands. Like there are a few different places where we are permitted to prohibit development. So part of the exercise is sort of determining what are the most important environmentally sensitive features we want to protect, and then finding the right planning tool to do that. So we would, expect that we would be going through sort of the range of things that are possible, and then making the right recommendation at the end of this.
Thank you, Ms. Perrin. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't see anyone else in the chat. Oh, I see hands. If you don't mind, use the chat so I don't miss that. I don't want to skip over you and make a mistake and miss you. So, Councillor Morse, and then Councillor Cutto, your hands up. Do you want to speak as well? Okay, great. Councillor Morse.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is about whether you're considering a type of designation that would be a permanent conservation zone of some kind.
Through the chair to the councillor. So maybe if I can just clarify, do you mean on the sort of broader Purcell's Cove backland areas, or on the RDD zone? I guess if the question is about the sort of broader Purcell's Cove backlands, we are limited in the charter by where we can prohibit development. So we are able to sort of we can limit but not entirely prohibit development. So conservation often means that it's owned by a level of government or a nonprofit that is like intending to, protect lands. So we sort of have to be cognizant of our abilities under the charter in that way.
Because the Shaw Wilderness Park there's a legal agreement that says it's permanently conserved. So it's already got its own designation, I guess, within urban reserve.
Right, exactly. So the Shaw Wilderness Park would likely get a different designation and zoning than privately owned lands in the area. So there are lands in the urban reserve designation to the east of Shaw Wilderness Park they're privately owned, so they'll need to be looked at more comprehensively. And that is something we would be doing through the regional plan review.
Okay, thank you. And just one final thing, if I can. Were you looking at all at vegetation or various vegetative communities? I know for sure that there's certain vegetation in that area that only occurs in 1 or 2 locations in Nova Scotia. So it's extremely rare and would be a conservation feature.
Sure, through the chair to the councillor. So this report sort of focuses in on the fact that the existing policy does identify some environmentally sensitive features. So we're sort of honing in on the fact that actually there is policy there that kind of guides us. But where this is starting a planning process, the more detailed exploration of that would be kind of down the line. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much.
Really quickly before I go to Councillor Cuttle, we need a motion to extend past 8 p.m. To make that motion. Nobody wants to make it.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
I'll make the motion.
Moved by Councillor Cuttle, second by Councillor Morse to move past 8 p.m. All those in favor, say aye.
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 You can vote against it if you want to. It's okay.
Unenthusiastically.
All right, Councillor Cuttle, all you.
Thanks. Well, actually, Councillor Cleary addressed one of my questions around time and just, making a priority on the subject lands in particular and not wanting to hold up that by looking at the other kind of rezoning of the urban reserve, just because of the fact that these can be developed as of right. And so there is an immediate risk to the environmentally sensitive pieces of the site. My second question had to do with the planning tools. And I know that this report is to go and to look at planning tools that can be used to protect the environmentally sensitive areas. But my question there is, what kind of tools, could you, at this point, if you can just give us a sense of what kind of tools you'd be looking at and what the strength of those tools would be to override the other plans that are in place, such as, the generalized future land use map or the MPS, and, do you think through this process we will be able to achieve in a timely manner some protections for the important pieces of these properties?
Through the chair to the councillor, thank you for the question. So the staff report, I guess the recommendation is sufficiently broad. It sort of just says to consider amendments to the various planning documents. So it's sort of giving us, just opening the book to amending all of the things, and we will go away and figure out what the best way of doing that is. The sort of two broad options that the report lays out, one is to amend the RDD zone so that all development could go by development agreement and maybe take away that as of right option. Now, I don't know if that's the right way, but that's certainly something we can look at. The other option might be where we are able to prohibit development on some environmentally sensitive features like steep slopes, like marshes and low-lying areas. There is the option of applying like conservation zoning. If we're able to identify where those areas are, you can certainly apply zoning that would sort of prohibit development on those features specifically. And then any proposed development would need to be kind of around it. So those are the types of things we could do. But certainly if we're finding that, say, the RDD development agreement policy wasn't kind of working the way we thought, the direction from council, the way the recommendation is written is sort of sufficiently broad that we could, bring a recommendation like that back. We'd expect that, we'd be doing consultation with council and the public and the property owner and determining the appropriate approach.
Okay, and you said that because we're doing this, it doesn't mean that I'm getting some weird feedback. Sorry. That's better. Thank you. Because we're doing this doesn't mean that there's a hold on what can happen here. And are there any short-term measures? Like, I think you talk about in your report how right now there's really not adequate protection for some of these environmentally sensitive areas, and they are at risk particularly through the as of right development. Are there any short-term measures that can be put in place to at least protect some of these sites while we are going through this process?
Through the chair to the councillor, so my suggestion would be, so we don't have the ability to do, say, interim development controls under the charter. Only the province is able to do that. Where we would be going away and consulting with the property owner. Honestly, I think sort of open and honest conversation about community value and that we value the environmental features here. Like, there's no reason to believe that the property owner has any interest in destroying the environment. So it seems to me that a first step is certainly talking to them about these issues that have been raised in the community, and it could be a positive conversation. So I would suggest that's a good first step.
All right, I like your optimism. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing nobody else on the list, I will ask for someone to call for the question on the motion.
Question.
Question's been called. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. Seeing none. All right, that passes. Thank you, Leah, for presenting, and Councillor for bringing it forward. All right, moving on to our next item, 13.2.1, implementing national surface backcountry trails within interior of Western Common Wilderness Common. I'm not sure who will take. All right, Councillor Cuttle, this is you.
This would be me. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that what am I reading? Sorry, excuse me. Motion that the Western Common Advisory Committee recommends Halifax and West Community Council recommends that Regional Council request a staff report considering proposed amendments to the Western Common Wilderness Common Master Plan to consider the implementation of natural surface backcountry trails within interior areas of the Western Wilderness Common.
Moved by Councillor Cuttle, second by Councillor Stoddard.
Thank you. That was a bit of a tongue twister, that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this motion comes from the Western Common Advisory Committee, and it's asking for a staff report to consider amendments to the current master plan for the Western Common. The Western Common, for those of you that don't know, is a wilderness park, one of the first wilderness parks in our municipality that is out by the Otter Lake landfill and goes down kind of the Prospect Road towards the Prospect Road Community Center, and includes some lakes. And in the original proposal, there's close to 60 kilometers of like active transit, 6-foot wide crusher gravel trail within that area. And I think, since this, I think the ambition for this park was really fantastic at looking at creating an amazing recreational amenity. But I think since it was proposed, a lot has changed in how we look at wilderness parks and how we build them. And so in discussions with that committee, we think it's worth having a review of what was originally proposed and to consider some amendments to create something that would be a little more feasible, because as it stands now, to build these trails at a grade and a slope and in a manner that would be to standard for these kind of 6-foot wide crusher gravel trails, they require a lot of blasting and heavy equipment and kind of go against what was originally intended with the idea, for the idea of a wilderness park. So the committee was all unanimously in support of this, and I hope Halifax and West Community Council approves this recommendation to take it to Regional Council.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Councillor Cuttle, for bringing this forward. As someone who hikes a lot, and especially in natural wooded areas, one of my favorite hikes is Cape Chignecto, and doing a several-day hike around the entire Cape. Natural is always better. Single track, getting through, enjoying the wilderness, and that's one of the things I love about the Shaw Wilderness Park. If you're trying to go from Williams Lake to Colpit Lake, it's going through and meandering through the trees and seeing nature close up. So I wholeheartedly support the Western Common Advisory Committee and your motion, because I think not only would it allow us to develop more trails in the area more feasibly, more cost effectively, they'll actually be nicer trails and better looking trails. And so I look forward to the staff report and any amendments that come from that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing nobody else, I ask for the question on that, on the main motion. Called.
Question.
Question's been called. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Seeing none. All right, great. So that's been passed. Thank you, Councillor. So moving on to our motions from members. Don't believe there are any motions from members. There's no in-camera, there are no added items. So going to our public participation aspect of the meeting. So this is the first time we've been able to do this in a very long time. And as a reminder to those watching from home, in order to have signed up as a public speaker, the deadline was 4:30, the business day prior to the hearing. We have 3 speakers signed up for today's meeting. And any of them, any of the member of public who registered in the clerk's office will be given 5 minutes on the topic. When we call your name, you may unmute your mic and begin speaking. Once you're finished, your comments and entering any questions of clarification that may come from members, please leave the meeting and watch from the rest of the meeting from the webcast. So our 3 speakers tonight, Kathleen Hall, Karen McKendry, and Martha Leary. So starting off with Kathleen Hall. Kathleen Hall, I see your name is in the meeting.
Hello.
Great, and I can see you as well. Hello, Kathleen, welcome, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair, councillors, staff, and members of the public. My name is said, Kathleen Hall, and I'm representing the Backlands Coalition this evening. I want to say that we have really endorsed the staff recommendations, and we're thrilled that the Community Council has passed the motion. And I really want to thank staff for their work on this, because I know it's very complicated. And moving forward, excuse me, I just wanted to make a few comments. And the first one has to do with the timing. Now, this already has been alluded to, but yeah, it certainly is a concern that something could theoretically happen there. And we certainly don't want that. So we need to make sure that we get on with figuring out the planning tools and moving forward. The mandate of the Williams Lake Conservation Company is to preserve the health and environs of Williams Lake. And we are very concerned that any development will affect the water, as we already have seen that come into play. We are dealing with big issues already, and we need to take steps to prevent further degradation of the water quality and quantity of the water. And we need to be looking into the remediation of the dam. But thanks to Councillor Cleary, the staff is already exploring that. So we look forward to that report in due course. We also want to broaden the definition of environmentally sensitive to recognize that in a deeper way, the relationship of water and wetlands and water courses is more connected to the land and the forest and the bedrock. And we do have concerns about the way that the maps 3A and 3B are based on information collected in 1997, and we certainly know that they're not accurate, and that there are many more like modern ways to collect information. So I really look forward to that, and I kind of got a sense from Ms. Perry that that's going to happen. For clarification, I did want to point out that the Backlands boundary for the Backlands Coalition as drawn includes the subject lands. Also, that the mission statement of the Backlands Coalition is that there be no development inside the boundary. And this includes all the lands that are currently zoned urban reserve. I also just want to quickly point out that we are pursuing, that is the Backlands Coalition, a model of community-based management. And this would represent the different interests that exist in the Backlands. For example, private landowners, federal government, provincial crown land, the municipality, the Nature Conservancy of Canada, Nova Scotia Nature Trust, Macintosh Run, etc. And recently we had some Masters of Planning students working on this concept, and they created a toolkit which explored to get this into play. And also they did a lot of research on precedents in other jurisdictions. So we're really excited about this, and we would be happy to share this with the community councillors. So I really want to thank you so much. I feel that we have really moved forward in terms of the how council is embracing the environment, and I'm so pleased with what I heard tonight. And I really, again, we really owe you thanks, and we're here to work with you. You know, you just at the drop of a hat. Thank you very much. Good evening.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. Any questions of clarification from members at all? Seeing none, thank you again for joining us.
Oh, okay, Patty. Councillor Cuddle.
Yep. Councillor
Sorry, I'm getting my mute stuck there. Yeah, Kathleen, I just wanted to ask you a question. You were talking about how you might have some more updated mapping, particularly around the water features and other sensitive areas. Have you shared that with staff yet?
No, because this just came up so quickly. We didn't really know what direction the staff report was going to take, but I think that anybody just even walking through there would identify other wetlands, some that dry up in parts of the year, but there are vernal pools. There's a lot more water in there that you can see from I think it's map 3B. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cleary, I see you're in the chat, but I think that was from another item, right?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch you there, Mr. Chair.
I see your name, but in the chat, but that's from another item before.
That was the previous one.
All right, great. Thank you. All right, moving on to Karen McKendry. Are you in the meeting?
Mr. Chair, speaker number 2, Karen, was in the meeting, but now I don't see Karen.
Okay.
So would you be able to move to the speaker 3?
Yep, that's not a problem. Martha Leary, do we have Martha Leary in the meeting at the moment?
Yes, hello.
Oh, I see Martha. Hi, welcome.
Hello, thank
Yes,
you, Mr. Chair.
We can hear you, and you have 5 minutes.
Okay, I'm Martha Leary, and I live in Armdale for the past 20 years. And I shop and volunteer and socialize in Spryfield. I'm a member of the Backlands Coalition and a director at Williams Lake Conservation Company. I wanted to talk regarding the area of Spryfield that we call the Backlands. The municipal planning for Spryfield happens in bits, sometimes really tiny bits and sometimes bigger bits, but it's always with the hope that those bits will eventually add up to a coherent community plan. Oh, I guess I could put my video on as well there, so you could see who I am. But we have great appreciation and extend thanks to the staff for their thoughtful consideration of the request to rezone that delicate and delicate and dynamic area of Spryfield, and their recommendations for more study and public participation. We need reliable, effective protection for our wilderness areas until a community vision for Spryfield can be incorporated into the plans. A vision for this part of HRM might consider how our natural infrastructure of the backlands may hold a key to future prosperity for this community. A community builds on its assets, and the people of Spryfield and Mainland South have been part of community planning for years. Some of their visions have been realized, like the Shaw Wilderness Park, the preservation of that part of the backlands. And we believe we can build on that asset of the backlands for the benefit of all. What if Spryfield became a destination, a unique urban example of our Nova Scotia topography, our natural history, flora, fauna, a setting for recreation, learning, and exploration, and it's easily accessed by public transport. Consider the business and employment opportunities for the people of Spryfield. What if Halifax truly understood the value and potential of the backlands for the people of Spryfield, HRM, and Canada? In the meantime, we need reliable, effective protection for our wilderness areas until a detailed community vision for Spryfield can be incorporated into HRM's plans. So thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight.
Thank you so much, Martha. Any questions of clarification from members of Community Council? Seeing none. Again, thank you, Martha, for joining us, and we'll move on to our next speaker. And I see, Karen, you are in the meeting now.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. So sorry for, I think I cut my internet cut out before. So thank you for hearing from me tonight. I'm also going to speak to the Williams Lake lands. So my name is Karen McKendry. I work with the Ecology Action Center as the Wilderness Outreach Coordinator. So that means I get to work on nature conservation at municipal, provincial, and national level, including advocating for more parks and protected areas. But tonight I'm especially delighted because we're speaking about a place that I am very familiar with personally. So these lands are lands I have been getting to know for more than 15 years now. I go there about once a week to go trail running. I go there all year round. I bring my family there. I see other community members there. I have contacted the landowner over the years and asked for permission to be there, and I've never heard back from them over the years. And I know it's sort of a perilous place, so I do worry about it every time that I'm there. So with regards to today's motions about the potential rezoning and the process to potentially look at that, I'm very supportive of the recommendations, but I just wanted to add a couple of specific elements that I hope are included in the follow through to the recommendations. So the first one is that the staff report identifies 4 environmentally sensitive features on the land. And I know this is according to HRM's definition of environmentally sensitive features, but I feel like that's a bit of a mixed bag and that it's getting kind of dated. And so as you proceed with the processes, I really encourage you to reconsider revising the list of HRM's environmentally sensitive features to modernize it. So for example, 2 environmentally sensitive features that could be considered by HRM are rare species and rare ecosystems. So these are features that are totally mappable. You can get site-specific information about them, and they could genuinely be considered in planning decisions. There are also conservation features that are found in the backlands, including at the site, but they aren't covered in the list you have so far. So going forward, I hope you'll consider additional environmentally sensitive features. I also hope that in the future, more current environmental information is used. So you saw in the staff report, maps 5 and 6 show where environmentally sensitive features are found, but those maps are from like 1987. So there is more specific current information about the locations of these features. And I was actually a little surprised those weren't drawn on. So for example, in the backlands, there is a really extensive report by Drs. Patrickman and Nick Hill that show the exact locations of all the wetlands and water courses in the area, including at this property. So again, I hope in those processes going forward that you'll use more modern and specific information about the area. And finally, I wanted to see a discussion in this about the use of regional park zoning. So I know the report does state that urban reserve is essentially used as a holding tank sometimes for lands we don't want to develop right now, but that category isn't really right for permanently protecting environmentally sensitive features. And so we do, I think, need new zoning types, and I hope that happens as part of the regional plan review process. But I would also like you to consider how regional park zoning is applied now and how it could be applied in the future under a broader definition. So right now, regional park zoning is usually applied to HRM-owned parkland, but it could also be applied to federal land or provincial land. And as part of the regional plan review, maybe you could look at it being applied to private land with landowner consent. So this is already something along the lines of what's done at the provincial level. Private landowners can receive designation as a provincial wilderness area or provincial nature reserve. Land trusts also have a tool for safeguarding land, including at the wilderness park. They've used one of those tools called conservation easements. So those tools also have incentives associated with them, created by whatever body is giving those. But in my experience, landowners seek these designations because they want to protect a place that's really special to them, and they realize that it's valued by community. And those incentives are sort of just add-ons. So this might be a great case to look at what is possible if you expand where regional park zoning could be included. Anyhow, all this to say, I support the recommendations, but I'll very much be watching the process going forward, and I hope it leaves some room to innovate for the really neat features that we have here.
Thank you so much, Karen. And Councillor Cleary has a question for a clarification for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. McKendry. Just quickly, you mentioned incentives. So what kind of incentives can you imagine the municipal government offering private landowners for agreeing to protect their lands, whether it's park designation or something else? Also, what would be the benefits to them, either on the designated land that's protected or the other land that might be developable or already developed that they own? So what would be in it for them? If I think about it sort of, like WYSIWYG, what's in it for me? What you see is what you get. So because you have expertise in this area, this area, why would someone do that?
Yeah, so I would say, so thank you through the chair or to everybody, or the thing that I'm supposed to say, sorry, not getting the protocol right, but to everybody. Part of my background is that I worked for the Nova Scotia Nature Trust for 11 years. And as part of that, I met all sorts of landowners who at first didn't know very much about the Nature Trust, but then came to be interested in working with them because the Nature Trust offered these optional tools for private landowners. So again, the primary motivation is that people have a piece of land that they know they value and others value and has special natural features on it, and they want to see it stay forever like that. That's the tool that a land trust or the province or a municipality can bring to it, is that certainty around it staying wild. That's the attractant for the private landowner. The incentive is that often when you make that arrangement, you're going to lose some ability to develop the land. And in our society, that's considered, something that you're supposed to be able to get from your land, is make money off it or develop it. So to sort of compensate or incentivize that, different organizations or levels of government offer usually tax-related incentives. So at the federal government level, they have something called the Eco Gifts program. If you donate land to a land trust, you then get a charitable tax receipt for the value of the land, and you can use that tax credit for 10 years going forward. So you've lost some ability to protect the land or to make money off the land, but then you're going to get these tax credits for 10 years. The province also offers something, the land trust offers something as well. So for example, lands protected under a conservation easement, the landowner doesn't have to pay tax on those lands anymore. So they're wild and they can still go there and they don't have to pay quite as much tax. So I think the municipality could look at what's in your toolbox about municipal tax rate or something like that and create these similar types of tools. And then people would actively choose to have, say, regional park zoning on their land.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Great information. Councillor Cuttle.
Actually, Councillor Cleary beat me to the punch again. I was just looking for some tangible examples of the incentive. So you did that very well. Thank you, Karen. And I just want to say thank you to you and to Kathleen and to Martha for speaking tonight. You know, there's a tremendous wealth of knowledge that exists within this community in relation to these lands and the backlands. And, you know, I really hope we see that as an asset as we're continuing to look at, you know, what needs to be protected in this area and how we might go about doing it. So I greatly appreciate you taking the time out this evening to come and speak with us. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Councillor, and Karen, again, thank you for presenting to us tonight and sharing your expertise. And that is it for our public speakers for this evening. Again, thank you all for participating. So moving on to the next date, or the date of our next meeting, which is June 22nd, 2021. And now ask for adjournment.